Mondays always feel the same. Emails piling up, a coffee machine running out of decent pods by noon, and people counting down to 5 o'clock like prisoners watching the clock. At exactly 5:12 p.m., I stepped into the elevator, ready to escape for the day. There were 4 others inside. Claire, HR's ray of sunshine, stood closest to the control panel, clutching some paperwork. Sam, our IT guy, was leaning against the back wall, his headphones in, staring at his phone. Linda, from accounting, hugged her bag like she was protecting something inside it. And Mike, from sales, had already launched into one of his stories. Some nonsense about closing a deal that nobody thought could happen. The doors slid shut, and the elevator hummed softly as it began its descent. We only made it a few floors before it jolted violently and came to a dead stop. The lights flickered, then steadied, leaving us bathed in a dim, yellowish glow. "Well, that's just great," Mike grumbled, slamming the emergency button repeatedly. "Perfect way to end a Monday." "It's probably just a small issue," Claire said, forcing a smile. "They'll fix it in no time." But I wasn't so sure. The air in the elevator felt wrong. Too still, too heavy. The hum of the machinery was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. Sam pulled out his phone, frowning. "No signal," he said. "Mine either," Linda added quietly. I checked my own phone. The bars were gone, and the time displayed on the screen made no sense. 11:47 p.m. "That's weird," I muttered, holding it up for the others to see. "It's still evening, right? Maybe your phone's glitching," Claire said. But when she glanced at her own, her face fell. "Mine says it's 3:28 a.m. We all compared our screens. Every device showed a different time, some in the past, some in the future. "It's just a technical issue," Mike said with a dismissive wave. "Let's not turn this into something dramatic." But the unease on everyone's face told me they didn't believe that either. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Or maybe it wasn't hours at all. None of us could agree on how much time had passed. The oppressive silence in the elevator was broken only by the sound of Claire pacing, her heels clicking nervously against the metal floor. Then she stopped. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" Mike asked, annoyed. She tilted her head, her eyes darting toward the ceiling. "It sounds like knocking." We all fell silent, straining to listen. At first, I heard nothing. Then it came, a soft, rhythmic tapping, as if someone was gently knocking from above the elevator. "Is there someone up there?" Linda whispered, "Klotzing her Beitzeiter." "Maybe maintenance?" Claire suggested weakly. "If it's maintenance, why wouldn't they say something?" Mike snapped. He craned his neck toward the ceiling and shouted, "Hey, get us out of here already." The tapping stopped. Sam crouched down in front of the control panel, pulling a screwdriver from his pocket. "Maybe I can figure out what's going on," he said, prying it open. We all watched as he examined the wiring inside. "This doesn't make any sense," he muttered. "What doesn't?" I asked. "These circuits, they're ancient, like decades old. I've worked on these systems before, and this tech hasn't been standard since the 80s. "Maybe it just hasn't been updated," Claire offered. "No," Sam said firmly. "This isn't just outdated. It's wrong, like someone patched it together to make it look functional." Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered again, plunging us into near darkness. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Claire whispered, "Do you hear that?" It wasn't tapping this time. It was something else. A faint hum, like distant machinery, mixed with soft, almost indistinguishable voices. "I don't hear anything," Mike said, though his voice betrayed him. The lights returned, and we all flinched as the elevator jolted. The control panel lit up again, but instead of numbers for the floors, there were symbols, strange, glowing shapes that none of us recognized. "What the hell?" Mike said, stepping closer to the panel. "What is this?" Sam stared at it, his brow furrowed. "I've never seen anything like this before." Before we could stop him, Mike jabbed at one of the symbols. The elevator groaned, shaking violently as it started to move again. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, as if the walls were vibrating around us. "Mike, what did you do?" Linda shouted, gripping the handrail. "I didn't do anything," he yelled back. The elevator came to a screeching halt, throwing us against the walls. The lights flickered once, then went out completely. And then, with a soft chime, the doors slid open. What lay beyond wasn't the lobby. The air outside the elevator was colder, sharper, and carried a faint metallic tang. We stepped out cautiously, the dim light from flickering fluorescent bulbs casting long shadows on the walls. The hallway didn't look like it belonged to our office building. The walls were cracked and stained, the floor covered in a thin layer of dust. A faint buzzing noise filled the air, coming from somewhere far off. This isn't right, Claire said, her voice trembling. No kidding, Mike muttered, running his hand along the wall. Where the hell are we? We moved slowly down the hallway, the sound of our footsteps eerily loud. Doors lined the walls on either side, each one slightly ajar, but none of us dared to open them. The nameplates on the doors were faded, the lettering barely legible. Wait, Linda whispered, pointing to one of the plates. That says HR. Claire leaned closer, squinting at the faded letters. It's my department, but we don't have offices like this. Maybe this is another part of the building, I said, though even I didn't believe it. It's abandoned, Sam added, his voice tight. Look at this place. It's falling apart. We continued down the hall, the buzzing growing louder. At the end of the corridor, we found a reception desk. Dust covered the surface, and the computer sitting on it looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Pinned to the wall behind the desk was a calendar. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, and the date at the top read, June 23rd, 1983. That can't be right, Linda said, shaking her head. It's just some old calendar someone left behind. But why is it here? Sam asked. Before anyone could answer, Claire let out a sharp gasp. What? I asked, turning toward her. She was staring at a framed photograph on the wall behind the desk. It showed a group of people standing in front of what looked like our office building. That's me, she said, pointing at the photo. I stepped closer, studying the image. Claire was there, but she looked different. Younger. She was smiling, holding a folder in her hands, standing next to someone I didn't recognize. This doesn't make sense, she whispered. It's fake, Mike said. It has to be. Does it? Sam asked quietly. He pointed to another photo, this one further down the wall. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. It was me. I was standing in the same pose as Claire, smiling awkwardly for the camera. The date at the bottom of the frame read, January 14th, 2023, the day I'd started working at the company. What the hell is this? I muttered, backing away from the photo. Is this some kind of prank? Mike snapped, his voice rising. Did one of you set this up? Why would we do that? Claire shot back. Before the argument could escalate, the buzzing noise intensified, a low hum vibrating through the floor. We need to go, Linda said, her voice barely audible. Now! The hallway seemed longer as we made our way back to the elevator. The light from the flickering bulbs overhead grew dimmer, the shadows around us deeper. As we walked, I noticed something strange. The doors that had been slightly ajar before were now wide open. Inside each room, there was nothing but darkness. Don't look inside, Sam said, his voice tight. Why? Claire asked. Just don't. We picked up our pace, the hum growing louder with every step. By the time we reached the elevator, it felt like the floor was vibrating beneath us. The doors were still open, the glowing symbols on the panel rearranged into a new pattern. What now? Linda asked, her voice shaking. We have to try again, Sam said, stepping inside. The elevator brought us here. It might be the only way out. I don't like this, Claire said, but she followed him inside. Mike hesitated, staring at the symbols. What if it just takes us somewhere worse? Do you want to stay here? I asked. He didn't answer, but after a moment, he stepped inside. Sam studied the symbols on the panel, his brow furrowed. I think this one will take us back, he said, pointing to a simple circle near the top. How do you know? Mike demanded. I don't, Sam admitted, but we don't have another choice. Before anyone could argue, he pressed the button. The elevator groaned, shaking violently as it started to move. The hum outside grew fainter, replaced by the familiar sound of the machinery. It's working, Claire said, her voice filled with cautious hope. But then the lights flickered, and the elevator lurched again. The panel sparked, and the symbols rearranged themselves once more. What's happening? Linda asked, gripping the handrail tightly. I don't know, Sam said, frantically pressing buttons. The elevator picked up speed, the walls vibrating around us. The hum returned, louder than before, and with it came a strange sound, like distant voices, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Then, without warning, the elevator stopped. The doors slid open, and we stepped out into another hallway. This one was pristine, brightly lit, with polished floors and sleek furniture. It looked like it belonged to a high-end office building, but something still felt wrong. What is this place? Claire asked. I don't know, I said, scanning the room, but I don't think we're supposed to be here. The new hallway looked perfect, too perfect. Every surface gleamed like it had just been polished, and the air smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. But something about it felt artificial, like it was trying too hard to convince us everything was fine. It looks normal, Linda said, her voice thin, but it doesn't feel right. We moved cautiously, our footsteps echoing softly against the polished floor. The corridor stretched far longer than it should have, with doors evenly spaced on either side. These doors were shut tight, each one marked only by a small silver plaque with no name or number. This doesn't make sense, Sam muttered, glancing back at the elevator, now out of sight. None of this makes sense. Maybe this is some kind of simulation, Claire offered, glancing nervously at the walls. Like a test or an experiment. Mike snorted. Oh, come on. A simulation? What are we? Rats in a maze? Do you have a better explanation? She snapped. Enough, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. Let's just figure out where we are. At the end of the hallway, we found a glass-walled conference room. Inside was a long table surrounded by high-backed chairs, a stack of files neatly arranged in the center. Sam opened the door, and we followed him in, our reflections flickering faintly in the glass as we moved. The files were old, yellowed pages in cracked leather folders. Sam opened one, flipping through its contents. It's employee records, he said, holding up a sheet. But they're weird. Look at this. He handed me the file. The document was a standard employee profile, but the photo attached was black and white, and the date of hire was April 5th, 1976. This doesn't make sense, I said, scanning the rest of the page. It listed details about the employee, projects they'd worked on, commendations they'd received, but under the end date, there was a blank space. I flipped through the stack, my stomach churning as I recognized some of the names. These weren't just old employees. They were people we worked with or thought we did. Linda pulled a file from the bottom of the stack. Her face went pale as she stared at the name on the front. Linda Harper. No, she whispered, shaking her head. What is it? Claire asked. Linda opened the file, her hands trembling. Inside was her own profile, down to the last detail. But the photo wasn't right. It showed her standing outside the building, holding a clipboard, her face bright with a smile. The date beneath the photo was wrong. It said she had started working here in 1993. That's impossible, she said, her voice barely audible. I was in college in 1993. I didn't even live in this city. What's the end date? Mike asked, leaning over her shoulder. Linda flipped to the last page, and her breath caught. There was no end date, just a blank space, just like the others. We all froze as the faint hum returned, this time coming from above us. It was low at first, like the sound of distant machinery, but it grew louder with each passing second. Time ago, I said, my voice tight. We hurried back into the hallway, but it wasn't the same as before. The doors we'd passed earlier were now wide open, and inside each room was nothing. Just empty black voids that seemed to swallow the light. Don't look, Sam said, his voice shaking. Why not? Mike demanded. Just don't. We didn't need to be told twice. The air grew colder, the hum louder, and the hallway itself seemed to stretch, the distance back to the elevator growing impossibly long. When we finally reached the elevator, the doors were open, waiting for us. The panel inside was glowing faintly, the symbols rearranged again into a new, unfamiliar pattern. What now? Claire asked, her voice on the edge of panic. We try again, Sam said, stepping inside. It's the only way. Mike hesitated, glancing back at the hallway. What if it takes us somewhere worse? Do you really want to stay here? I countered. With a reluctant nod, he stepped in, and the doors slid shut behind us. Sam studied the panel, his brow furrowed. "It's not random," he said after a moment. "These symbols, they're shifting based on something. I think they're tied to us." "What do you mean?" Claire asked. "I mean, the elevator knows we're here. It's reacting to us. Every stop is a response." "That's insane," Mike said. "Is it?" Sam shot back. "Look at what's happened so far." He hesitated, then pressed one of the symbols, a simple triangle near the bottom of the panel. The elevator jolted, then began to move. The hum outside faded, replaced by the familiar sound of the machinery. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that we'd found the way back. But then the lights flickered, and the hum returned, louder than ever. "What's happening?" Linda asked, gripping the handrail tightly. "I don't know," Sam said, frantically pressing buttons. The elevator began to shake, the walls vibrating around us. The whispers returned, louder and more chaotic, overlapping until they were nearly deafening. The elevator shuddered to a halt, and the doors creaked open. We stepped out into what looked like the same lobby we'd left when this all began. The receptionist's desk was there, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. "Are we back?" Claire asked cautiously. I didn't answer. Something didn't feel right. The air was too still, the hum faint but still present, like it was waiting for us to notice it. Outside, through the glass doors, the street looked normal. Cars passed by, and people walked along the sidewalks. But as I stepped closer, I saw it. A billboard across the street, its letters glowing bright in the evening light. "Welcome back, June 23rd, 2023. At first, relief washed over me. But as the letters flickered, a second message appeared beneath it. "Don't look back." We stood frozen in the lobby, the billboard's warning seared into our minds. "Don't look back." "I don't understand," Claire whispered. "We're back, right? This is our time, isn't it?" The city outside looked normal at first glance, but the longer I stared, the more things felt off. The air was heavy, the sky a shade too bright for evening. Cars rolled by, but none of the drivers turned their heads toward us. The people walking past the building moved in perfect, mechanical rhythms, like actors following a script. Sam broke the silence. "Something's wrong. It's almost right, but not. I'm not staying here to find out what's wrong," Mike said, heading toward the glass doors. "This is over. We're done." "Wait," Linda said, her voice tight with fear. "What if it's not over? What if it's a trap?" Mike whirled around. "A trap? What do you want to do, Linda? Stay in that elevator forever?" "We shouldn't split up," I said firmly. Mike ignored me. He pushed open the glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. For a moment, he hesitated, scanning the street. Then he turned back to us and yelled, "See? It's fine. We're fine." The glass doors swung shut behind him, and that's when it happened. The street went silent. The cars stopped mid-motion. The pedestrians froze in place, their heads snapping toward Mike in unison. Guys," Mike called, backing away from the frozen figures. Before we could react, the pedestrians started walking toward him, their movements jerky and unnatural. Their heads remained locked on him, eyes unblinking. Mike bolted back toward the building, slamming into the doors. "Let me in," he yelled, pounding on the glass. Sam rushed to open the door, but the glass wouldn't budge. "It's locked," he said, panic rising in his voice. Mike turned back to the street, his breathing ragged. The frozen people had surrounded him, their faces blank and expressionless. "Mike, don't move," I shouted, even though I had no idea what to do. One of the figures reached out, its hand hovering inches from his shoulder. And then, as if on cue, the billboard flickered again. "You can't leave." The lights in the lobby flickered, and suddenly Mike was gone. 1 second he was there, and the next the street was empty. The figures turned back to their mechanical routines, as if nothing had happened. "No," Linda whispered, her voice cracking. "What just happened?" Claire asked, looking to me for an answer I didn't have. "He's gone," Sam said flatly, staring out at the motionless street. The elevator didn't let him leave. I don't know what drove me back to the elevator, but I felt its pull like a magnet. The doors were still open, the glowing symbols on the panel waiting for us. "We can't stay here," I said, breaking the silence. Linda looked at me, her face pale. And what happens if it takes us somewhere worse? We don't have a choice, Sam replied, stepping inside. It's clear this place isn't letting us go. Reluctantly, Linda and Claire followed. As soon as we were all inside, the doors slid shut. The panel flickered, the symbols rearranging themselves into a new configuration. Sam studied them, his brow furrowed. Do you think it knows what we're trying to do? Claire asked, her voice trembling. Sam didn't answer. Instead, he pressed one of the symbols, a diamond shape in the corner. The elevator jolted, and the hum returned, louder than ever. The walls vibrated, the lights flickered, and the whispers came back, overlapping and frantic. Why is it doing this? Linda shouted over the noise. Because it can, Sam replied grimly. The elevator shuddered to a stop, and the doors opened again. We stepped out into a room that looked identical to the one we had just left. The same lobby, the same glass doors, the same street outside. But something was different. The billboard no longer displayed the warning. Instead, it showed a live feed of us standing in the lobby, staring at the screen. That's not possible, Claire said, taking a step back. The feed zoomed in on Linda, focusing on her face. Beneath her image, words appeared. Next, Linda let out a choked sob, backing away from the screen. No. Linda, calm down, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's trying to scare us. Don't let it. But what if it's right? She cried. What if I'm next? Stop it, Sam said sharply. We're not going to let anything happen to you. We just need to. Before he could finish, the elevator doors slammed shut behind us. The panel inside flickered, the symbols changing once again. No, Sam whispered, rushing back to the doors. He pried them open with his hands, but the elevator was gone. We were trapped. The hum returned, this time coming from all around us. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. Do you hear that? Claire asked, her voice barely audible. It wasn't whispers this time. It was a voice. Choose, it said, deep and distorted, echoing through the room. Choose what? I yelled, spinning around. What do you want from us? The lights flickered again, and the voice repeated. Choose. We stared at each other, paralyzed by fear. The word echoed again, louder this time, until it was deafening. Linda screamed, covering her ears, and then the lights went out. The lights stayed off for what felt like an eternity. The room was so dark, I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face. The hum was gone, replaced by the suffocating sound of silence. Then a single fluorescent bulb flickered to life above us, casting a pale glow over the lobby. Linda was gone. Linda, Claire called out, spinning in circles, her voice trembling. Where is she? Sam said, his eyes darting around the room. The billboard outside lit up again, but the live feed was gone. In its place was a single message, flashing in bold red letters. Your turn. No, Claire whispered, backing into a corner. I'm not doing this. I'm not playing whatever game this is. Calm down, I said, though my heart was pounding. We'll figure this out. We just need to. The voice interrupted me, deep and distorted, vibrating through the walls. Choose. What does that mean? Sam asked, looking around. It wants us to decide something, I said. But what? The voice echoed again, louder this time. Choose who leaves. No, Claire said immediately. No, I'm not doing this. Neither am I, Sam said, shaking his head. There has to be another way. But the voice repeated the command, its tone sharp and demanding. Choose who leaves. The air felt heavier, the pressure in the room building with every passing second. I looked at the glass doors, hoping for some kind of sign, but the street outside was empty now. Even the cars and the eerie pedestrians had vanished. It's forcing us to decide, I said finally. That's the only way this ends. How do you know that? Claire snapped. Because it's not going to stop until we do, I replied. Claire let out a shaky breath. So what? We're supposed to pick someone to stay behind. Her voice broke on the last words, and the room fell silent again. We didn't say it, but the question hung in the air. Who would it be? Sam broke the silence first. If we don't choose, it's going to take all of us. And if we do choose? Claire shot back. Then at least some of us get out, he said, his voice heavy. Maybe even all of us, eventually. No, Claire said firmly. I'm not leaving anyone behind. Not after what happened to Mike and Linda. The lights flickered again, and the voice returned, louder and more insistent. Choose. The pressure in the room intensified, and I felt the floor beneath us start to vibrate. The walls creaked, as if the building itself was alive. It's going to crush us if we don't do something, I said. Claire's resolve cracked. Fine, she said, her voice shaking. If it's the only way, I'll stay. No, Sam said immediately. We're not doing that. None of us should have to. I'll stay. I interrupted, surprising even myself. What? Claire and Sam said at the same time. I'll stay, I repeated. If that's what it takes, then so be it. You two go. Claire shook her head. No, that's not fair. Why should you? Because I'm the one saying it, I said sharply. I don't want to argue about this. Just go before it's too late. The lights flickered again, and the voice softened, almost satisfied. Decision made. The pressure in the room lifted, and the elevator doors slid open with a quiet chime. The glowing symbols on the panel were gone, replaced by a single button marked exit. Go, I said, gesturing toward the elevator. Claire hesitated, tears welling in her eyes, but Sam grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the doors. We'll come back for you, he said, looking at me. I swear we will. I didn't answer. I just watched as the doors closed, leaving me alone in the silent lobby. For a moment, nothing happened. The elevator's hum faded into the distance, and the lobby grew still. Then the billboard lit up again, displaying a single word, stay. The lights flickered, and the air grew colder. I felt a strange sensation, like the building itself was pressing down on me. The walls around me seemed to stretch and warp, the cracks in the floor widening into dark, bottomless voids. I realized too late that I wasn't being left behind. I was becoming part of the building. Meanwhile, Claire and Sam stepped out of the elevator into the familiar lobby of our office building. It was exactly as they remembered it, bright, bustling, alive. Did we make it? Claire asked, her voice trembling. Sam nodded, though he looked unsure. I think so. They walked outside, the sunlight warm on their faces. Cars zipped by, and people chatted on their phones. Everything seemed normal. But as they stood on the sidewalk, a billboard across the street caught Claire's eye. It wasn't advertising anything. It was blank, except for a single message. You can never leave. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'd love to hear your comments.